That was the easy version. Simple, dramatic, comfortable.
But the truth was much colder than that.
Nora Vance did not come back to punish him. She came back because the building was lying.
Bad steel was inside its bones, and dirty money was moving through hidden pipes.
David made one mistake no charm, money, or expensive clothing could cover. After throwing Nora out of their home in the rain, he kept using her name.
By then, David was no longer just an unfaithful husband. He was a danger to everyone who would walk beneath his lies. And the woman he thought he had erased was the only person careful enough to find the lie.
On the night David put Nora out, she stood with one suitcase and nowhere to put her pain.
This life is mine. If you cannot fit into it, leave it.
You are making a mistake. He mistook the building for the foundation. And he forgot who had been holding it up.
People in Charlotte would later say David Miller lost everything because his ex-wife came back for revenge. That was the easy version. It was the version people whispered in private clubs and construction offices, because it made the story sound like a bitter divorce that got out of hand. A woman was humiliated, a man became rich, and when she had power again, she destroyed him. Simple, dramatic, comfortable. But the truth was much colder than that. Nora Vance did not walk back into David's life because she wanted to punish him. She walked back in because a building was rising over a city block with bad steel inside its bones, because numbers had been moved through vendor accounts like dirty water through hidden pipes, and because David had made one mistake that no amount of charm money or expensive clothing could cover. After throwing Nora out of their home in the rain, he kept using her name. By the time Nora discovered that David was no longer just an unfaithful husband, he was a danger to everyone who would one day live, work, and walk beneath the structure he was pretending to build honestly. And the woman he thought he had erased was the only person careful enough to find the lie. On the night David put Nora out, she stood in the private elevator hallway of their penthouse with one small suitcase and a blouse, still damp from the rain she had run through to get upstairs. Behind her, through a wall of glass, the city glowed beneath the storm. In front of her, the man she had loved for 7 years looked at her as if she were an old invoice he no longer needed to keep. The apartment behind him had marble counters, heated floors, imported light fixtures, and the view David liked to show off whenever investors came over. Nora knew the cost of every surface in that room because she had argued against nearly all of it. She knew which payments were late when he ordered the custom wine wall. She knew which subcontractor had waited an extra 12 days because David decided the master suite needed handmade Italian tile. She knew how many nights she had stayed awake building the cash flow plan that made the bank believe he was stable. None of that mattered to him anymore. David had become the kind of man who mistook the building for the foundation. He looked at the glass and stone around him and decided it proved he had always deserved this life. He forgot the years when Nora had carried the risk quietly enough for him to call himself fearless. 5 years earlier, before the penthouse, before the cars, before the $100 million redevelopment contract that made David's name appear in business magazines, Nora Vance had been one of the most promising finance students to come out of Duke. She was not loud about her intelligence. That was part of what made people underestimate her. In classrooms full of students trying to sound brilliant, Nora had the habit of listening until the room had exhausted itself. Then, she would ask one clean question, and the entire case study would tilt. Her professors noticed that she had a rare mind for risk. Nora could look at a balance sheet and see not only what had happened, but what was likely to break next. She noticed timing gaps, supplier pressure, quiet liabilities, optimistic assumptions tucked into footnotes. She had offers before graduation from firms that would have paid her more at 24 than her father had made during some of his hardest years. Charles Vance had raised Nora after her mother died, and he wanted a life for his daughter that did not require apology. He had worked long enough in small business lending to understand the difference between ambition and appetite. So when Nora brought David Miller home and told her father she was going to marry him, Charles did not pretend to be delighted. David was handsome in the easy way of men who know how to fill a doorway. He was a small construction contractor then, operating out of a cramped, rented office in South End, with a printer that jammed every other morning and a sign on the door that looked more confident than the company behind it. He had 3 regular workers, a rotating list of laborers, 2 aging trucks, and a talent for making the future sound closer than it was. He spoke about towers, redevelopment corridors, city contracts, and one day building a company with his name on cranes across the skyline. Nora listened to him and heard possibility. Charles listened and heard speed without brakes. He tried to warn her gently at first. He told Nora that a man could dream big and still be careless with people. He told her David seemed to enjoy the image of success more than the discipline required to keep it. Nora heard the concern, but she also heard the old fear of a father who had watched life take away too much. She was young enough to believe love could refine ambition into something noble. She married David in a modest chapel with white roses, borrowed earrings, and a reception paid for mostly from her savings. David held her hand that day and promised her that when his company finally rose, everyone would know she had been there from the beginning. Nora believed him. For the first year, belief looked almost romantic. They ate dinner on overturned paint buckets in half-finished job sites. They laughed when the office roof leaked into a trash can. Nora learned the smell of sawdust, wet concrete, and burnt coffee from gas station machines. David would spread plans across their kitchen table and talk until midnight about what he would build if only someone gave him the chance. Then the invoices started coming faster than the checks. Small contractors live on timing, and David was terrible at timing. He underbid jobs because he wanted to win them. He paid for materials before clients released funds. He trusted handshakes with men who vanished when the work was done. Every mistake came wrapped in a story about how close he had been to a breakthrough. Nora did not shame him. She built systems. During the day, she worked as a tax consultant for small businesses that could not afford full-time finance staff. In the evenings, she tutored accounting students and junior analysts. Late at night, after David had fallen asleep with his phone still in his hand, she opened freelance bookkeeping files and reconciled accounts for restaurants, repair shops, and tiny non-profits. She learned to sleep in pieces, 2 hours before dawn, 40 minutes after dinner, 10 minutes in her parked car before walking into a client meeting. There were weeks when she made more from those 3 jobs than David's company earned from construction. She did not say it that way. She called it helping them get through a hard season. The season simply kept extending. Nora stopped buying new clothes unless a seam split beyond repair. She cut her own hair twice, badly the first time, and carefully the second. She drank instant coffee because the better coffee was for client meetings David insisted might change everything. When friends invited them away for a long weekend, Nora smiled and said they were too busy. The truth was that she had already moved the vacation money into payroll, so 2 workers with children could be paid on Friday. David accepted these sacrifices with gratitude at first. He would kiss the top of her head while she worked at the kitchen table and call her the smartest woman he had ever known. He told people she was the engine behind Miller Construction. He said it proudly when the room was small. As the rooms got larger, his gratitude got quieter. Nora noticed the change in small ways before she admitted its meaning. David stopped asking what she thought and began asking whether she had finished what he needed. He stopped calling her careful and started calling her anxious. When she warned him that a supplier payment schedule would strain their credit line, he laughed in front of two junior project managers and said Nora could find a storm cloud in a weather report that promised sun. Everyone laughed because David laughed first. Nora smiled because she knew how expensive male embarrassment could become when corrected in public. Later at home, she explained the numbers again. David kissed her forehead, told her she worried too much, and did exactly what she had warned him not to do. 3 weeks later, she was the one calling the supplier, renegotiating terms and protecting the job from stopping. That became the pattern. David took the risks. Nora cleaned the edges. David made the promises. Nora found the cash. David sold the dream. Nora built the documents that kept the dream from collapsing under its own weight. The opportunity that changed everything arrived through a redevelopment plan on the edge of downtown, a tired stretch of warehouses, empty lots, and aging storefronts. The city wanted transformed into a mixed-use district. The project was worth $100 million across phases, and the developer needed a construction partner hungry enough to move fast, but credible enough to satisfy lenders, insurers, and the city review board. David wanted that contract so badly he could barely sleep. On paper, Miller Construction was not ready. The company had grown, but not cleanly. Its revenues looked impressive until someone looked at margins. Its debt was manageable only if every upcoming payment arrived on time. Its safety record was decent, but its internal reporting was sloppy. David had relationships charm and a good eye for how a finished space should feel. He did not have the financial discipline a project of that size demanded. Nora had the discipline. She spent 6 weeks rebuilding the bid package until it looked like a company more mature than David had actually created. She corrected cost schedules, wrote risk controls, documented contingency plans, cleaned old liabilities, and negotiated letters from suppliers who trusted her more than they trusted David. She called former classmates not to ask for favors, but to ask the right questions about bonding capacity, lender expectations, and developer concerns. She stayed up until sunrise more than once, not because David asked, but because some part of her still believed that if he finally got the chance he had been chasing, he would become the man he kept promising to be. The final presentation carried David's name. His voice filled the room. His suit was new, bought on a credit card Nora had quietly planned to pay off over 3 months. He spoke with confidence about vision, scale efficiency, and community impact. When questions turned technical, his answers were good because Nora had drilled them with him for days. When questions turned financial, he leaned on the documents Nora had built. When the panel asked about risk, David glanced once toward the back of the room where Nora sat with her hands folded around a pen and repeated the language she had written for him. Miller Construction 1. For one evening, Nora allowed herself to feel the sweetness of it. David lifted her off her feet in the office parking lot after the call came in. Employees cheered. Someone brought cheap champagne in paper cups. David told everyone that this was only the beginning, and Nora let herself imagine a different life. Not a life of luxury exactly. She imagined 8 hours of sleep. She imagined paying every bill before the due date. She imagined David finally setting down the hunger that had made him so restless. Success did not calm David. It fed him. The first advance payment arrived, and David began spending as if the full $100 million belonged to him personally. He leased a black sports car with doors that opened like a performance. He moved them from the small townhouse Nora loved into the penthouse he said clients expected him to have. He replaced his old work boots with Italian shoes that never touched a job site unless a photographer was present. At first, Nora told herself it was image management. In construction, she knew appearance could affect confidence. Lenders wanted to see stability. Developers wanted to feel they had chosen a rising company. She tried to distinguish between necessary presentation and vanity. David made the distinction harder every week. He joined clubs where initiation fees could have covered 2 months of equipment rentals. He hosted dinners where wine cost more than Nora's first car. He began mentioning names Nora had never heard before, people who moved through the city's wealthier circles, and treated David like a newly admitted member of a private language. Among them was Vanessa Cole, a model and event hostess with a polished smile, a careful social media presence, and a gift for making powerful men feel even more powerful. Nora did not hate Vanessa. That would have been too simple. Vanessa was not the person who had promised Nora a life of partnership. Vanessa had not watched Nora fall asleep over payroll spreadsheets and then taken credit for the company surviving. Still, it hurt to watch David become brighter in another woman's attention than he had been in his wife's devotion. He started bringing Vanessa to events where Nora had once stood beside him. He said it was business. Vanessa knew donors, brokers, designers, and people who could make the project visible. Nora knew that visibility mattered, but she also knew the difference between networking and performance. David liked how Vanessa looked in photographs next to him. He liked not being reminded that every expensive glass raised in his honor had a cost line somewhere. At home, he grew impatient with Nora's questions. When she asked why a vendor payment had cleared before inspection, he told her not to drag him back into small thinking. When she asked why the company card showed charges from a luxury boutique, he said image was part of growth. When she pointed out that project funds were not personal funds, his face hardened in a way she had not seen before. He told her she sounded like a bookkeeper. The word was meant to shrink her. Nora had helped design the financial controls that won him the project. But in David's new life, the person who controlled money was less glamorous than the person who spent it. He wanted applause, not accountability. He wanted the language of empire, not the discipline of ledgers. The first hard clue came folded inside something ordinary. Nora had been reviewing a batch of invoices because the numbers for structural steel were not lining up with the project schedule. A supplier she knew had issued a partial delivery record, but the payment amount was larger than expected and routed through a vendor name she did not recognize, Larkspur Materials Coordination. The name sounded harmless, the kind of bland company title designed to be forgotten. Its address, however, sat in a shared office suite used by dozens of shell companies. Nora made a note. She did not accuse anyone. Good auditors know that suspicion is not proof. She requested backup documentation and waited. 2 days later, a jewelry receipt appeared in David's jacket pocket when Nora picked it up from the back of a dining chair. It was not hidden well. David had grown careless in the safety of being admired. The receipt was for a diamond bracelet paid through a corporate account tied to a consulting expense. On the same day, Vanessa posted a photo online with her wrist angled just enough for the bracelet to catch the light. Nora stared at the image for a long time. The pain came first, hot and humiliating. Then the training came back. The receipt was not only evidence of an affair, it was evidence of misuse of company funds. And if David was comfortable stealing from soft categories like consulting and events, he might be comfortable stealing from places where the harm was harder to see. That night, rain battered the city so fiercely the windows trembled. Nora waited until David came home. He smelled of expensive cologne and the cold, damp air of valet lanes. She had the invoice copies on the kitchen island weighted under her old calculator. She did not scream. She did not ask whether he loved Vanessa. She asked why project money was being used for personal gifts, why Larkspur Materials had no clear operating history, and why structural payments were moving before inspection reports were complete. David looked at the papers, then at Nora, and something in his expression shifted from annoyance to contempt. He did not deny the bracelet. He did not explain the vendor. Instead, he attacked the person asking the question. He told Nora she was embarrassing him. He told her she had no idea how people at his level lived. He said he needed a woman beside him who understood success, not someone who counted receipts like poverty was a virtue. The more calmly Nora spoke, the more violent his pride became. He accused her of trying to keep him small because she was afraid he no longer needed her. Nora had spent years being tired. She had spent years being patient. But in that moment, a quiet truth moved through her with the force of weather. David did not resent her because she had failed him. He resented her because she remembered who he had been before the suit fit. When she told him the expenses had to be reported and corrected, David walked to the bedroom, pulled her suitcase from the closet, and threw it open on the floor. He packed carelessly, as if even her belongings were clutter. A few blouses, a pair of shoes, a folder of personal documents. He left behind the framed wedding photo on the dresser and the old gray ledger she had used during their hardest years. He told her the penthouse was his. The company was his. The life was his. If she could not fit into it, she could leave it. So Nora left. She did not take the elevator down like a woman making a dramatic exit. She took it like a woman whose hands were shaking so badly she had to press the lobby button twice. The doorman looked at her wet hair, the suitcase, the blouse clinging to her shoulders, and understood enough to look away. Outside, the rain flattened the city into reflections. Nora stood beneath the building's awning and realized she had spent years building shelter for a man who had just locked her out of it. The first place she went was not her father's house. Shame has strange geography. It can make the people who love you feel farther away than strangers. Nora checked into a modest hotel near the highway with a card she hoped David had not frozen yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, opened her suitcase, and found that one of her shoes was missing. David had packed only the left one. That small cruelty broke her harder than the shouting. For the next 2 days, Nora moved through the world as if sound had been turned down. She called the bank and learned that David had removed her access from several business accounts. She called the company office and was told with awkward politeness that all finance questions now went through David's new executive assistant. She sent herself copies of old personal tax records from a cloud folder before her password stopped working. Then she did something David never expected. She rested. Not peacefully, not well, but for the first time in years, Nora slept without an alarm set for a bookkeeping deadline. When she woke, the grief was still there, but beneath it was something else, something steadier. Her body had been keeping score longer than her heart had been willing to admit. On the third morning, she called her father. Charles did not say he had warned her. He did not ask why she had stayed so long. He drove across town, knocked on her hotel room door, and when Nora opened it, he held out a paper bag with coffee, clean socks, and the kind of silence that lets a wounded person decide when words can enter the room. Nora cried then, not loudly, not beautifully, but with the exhausted grief of someone who had finally reached a place where she did not have to defend the person who hurt her. Charles took her home for a week. In her childhood bedroom, under a shelf of old debate trophies and finance textbooks, Nora began sorting what remained. She had no job, no clear access to the company she had helped stabilize, and no desire to explain her life to people who would treat her pain like gossip. The call from Adam Sterling came through an alumni connection, though Nora would later learn he had asked about her carefully, without turning her situation into a spectacle. Adam had known Nora at Duke, but not well enough to claim history he had not earned. He remembered her from a graduate finance seminar, where she had politely dismantled a risk model that everyone else in the room had praised. Adam came from money, but he had built Sterling Group into something larger than inheritance. The company invested in complex real estate and infrastructure projects, and its reputation depended on entering troubled deals before they became disasters. When Nora agreed to meet him, she prepared herself for pity. She expected the softened voice, the careful expression, the offer wrapped in charity. Instead, Adam placed a project file between them at a quiet coffee shop and asked her what she saw. It was a test, but not an insulting one. Nora opened the file. 10 minutes later, she had found a timing mismatch in a contractor draw request. 20 minutes later, she had identified a weak control in change order approvals. By the time her coffee went cold, she had marked 3 places where Sterling Group was exposed to unnecessary risk. Adam listened without interrupting. Only after she finished did he tell her that Sterling needed a director of project controls. The role would oversee audits, budgets, contractor compliance, and risk reporting across major developments. He made the offer plainly, not because she was David Miller's discarded wife, not because he felt sorry for her, because she was very good at work that most people only respected after something failed. Nora asked him whether hiring her would create gossip. Adam said gossip was a poor reason to waste competence. That sentence stayed with her. She accepted the role, but she entered it carefully. She did not want to be rescued. She wanted to be useful. She rented a small apartment with plain white walls and a kitchen table barely large enough for 2 plates. For the first month, her mattress sat on the floor because she refused to buy furniture with money she had not yet earned. She wore the same 3 suits in rotation, changed the buttons on one herself, and kept her hair tied back because it made mornings simpler. If anyone at Sterling expected a broken woman, Nora disappointed them. She was quiet, prepared, and almost painfully thorough. She reviewed contracts the way some people read personal letters, noticing tone omissions, pressure points. She treated junior staff with respect because she knew how often people closest to the paperwork saw problems first. She never used emotion where evidence belonged. Within 6 months, 2 troubled projects improved because of controls she put in place. A hotel renovation avoided a costly delay after Nora caught a subcontractor insurance lapse before work began. A warehouse conversion recovered nearly $500,000 from duplicate billing because Nora insisted that payment logs be reconciled against delivery records, not just approved invoices. People who had initially been curious about her divorce stopped whispering because work gave them something better to discuss. Adam remained professional. That mattered. He did not hover. He did not turn every late night at the office into intimacy. He respected the clean distance Nora needed while rebuilding herself. When he praised her work specifically. When he disagreed with her, he did it honestly. Nora began to remember what it felt like to be in a room with a man who did not need her to become smaller so he could feel large. The past returned through a board packet. Sterling Group had recently taken a larger oversight role in the downtown redevelopment project David's company was building. Cost overruns, schedule irregularities, and a lender's quiet concern had triggered a compliance review. The project name sat on Nora's desk on a Monday morning, printed neatly on the cover of a file thick enough to make the junior analyst who delivered it hold it with both hands. Riverside Quarter, the $100 million contract. David's dream. For several minutes, Nora did not open the file. She looked at the name and felt the old hallway return, rain, suitcase, missing shoe, the doorman looking away. Then she breathed through it and walked to Adam's office. She told him there was a conflict of history. She explained enough for the legal team to understand the personal connection without turning her marriage into a performance. Adam did not pressure her. He offered to assign the review to someone else. Nora considered it overnight. By morning, she had made her decision. She would lead the technical audit with a legal observer and a second project controls manager assigned to review every major finding. She would not handle the matter informally. She would not meet David alone. She would document everything twice. If the project was clean, the record would show it. If it was not, the record would show that too. That was not revenge. That was discipline. When Nora arrived at the Riverside Quarter site 2 weeks later, the frame of the first building had already climbed above the old warehouse roofs. Workers moved across temporary platforms. Cranes swung slowly against a pale morning sky. The site smelled of wet lumber, diesel, concrete dust, and the metallic bite of exposed steel. David saw her before she reached the site trailer. For a second he looked almost confused, as if his mind refused to place this version of Nora into the role in front of him. She was not wearing the faded cardigan he used to mock, or the practical shoes he said made her look invisible. She wore a charcoal suit, a hard hat with Sterling's logo, and an expression so composed it seemed to drain the color from his confidence. He recovered quickly because performance had always been his instinct. He greeted the Sterling team with warmth, shook hands too firmly, and addressed Nora by her first name in a tone meant to remind everyone they had history. Nora corrected the tone without correcting him directly. She introduced herself by title, introduced the legal observer, and asked for the requested documents. David's smile tightened. The first day produced nothing explosive. That was how serious fraud often worked. It did not leap out. It made you follow small irregularities until they formed a shape. Missing batch tickets, revised delivery logs, change order approvals signed unusually late, a supplier substitution request that appeared to have been approved before the engineering memo supporting it was written. Nora did not react outwardly. She asked for originals. She asked for source files. She asked for site photographs from delivery dates. She requested mill certificates for steel shipments and concrete test reports for pours already completed. David's project manager, a tired man named Ellis, avoided her eyes when she asked why several material records had been scanned from photocopies instead of uploaded from supplier portals. David tried charm first. He suggested the team was overcomplicating routine paperwork. He said big projects always had messy records. He joked that Nora had never met a form she did not want in triplicate. No one from Sterling laughed. The joke landed in the stale air of the trailer and died there. By the second week, Nora had mapped the vendor trail. Larkspur Materials Coordination had appeared in the records as a logistics consultant, then as a materials expediter, then as a processing intermediary on payments that should have gone directly to certified suppliers. The invoices were boring by design: freight adjustment, procurement coordination, rush handling, compliance processing. Each line item was small enough to avoid attention on its own, but together they formed a river of money moving away from the project. The address matched the shared suite Nora had noted months earlier. The business registration was thin. Its listed manager had ties to a lifestyle management company that arranged private events, vehicle rentals, and luxury purchases. One payment date matched the bracelet receipt. Another matched a deposit on David's sports car. Another matched a weekend suite at a resort where Vanessa had posted a sunrise photo with a caption about being chosen by people who dream big. Nora saved every document. The material substitutions were worse. The project specifications required certified structural steel from approved vendors and concrete mixes tested to particular strength standards. Some shipments matched, others did not. Delivery photographs showed bundles with heat numbers that did not correspond to the certificates in the file. Concrete core tests from one section had been delayed, then replaced by summary letters from a testing company that had no record of issuing them. Nora sent samples for independent review through Sterling's engineering team. While she waited, she kept tracing approvals. That was when David's second betrayal surfaced. Several substitution forms carried Nora's name. At first, she thought she had misread the line. Then she saw the old digital signature, the one she had used years earlier when she handled Miller Construction's finance approvals. Her stomach went cold in a way anger could not reach. The forms claimed that Nora Vance, finance and risk consultant, had reviewed cost-saving substitutions and approved them as consistent with the project's controls. The dates were from after David threw her out. For a moment, the trailer walls seemed too close. Nora placed one hand flat on the table and made herself breathe. It was one thing to be betrayed. It was another thing to be used as cover for danger. David had not only discarded her labor after it no longer flattered him, he had kept her credibility like a stolen key. The legal observer watched her carefully and asked if she needed to step away. Nora said she needed the access logs. That request changed the temperature of the audit. David resisted. His attorneys delayed. His project administrator claimed old records had been archived. Nora did not argue. She issued formal requests through Sterling, tied them to contract compliance, and gave deadlines. When the first set of logs arrived incomplete, she documented the omission and requested the server backups. When David's team sent flattened PDFs instead of original files, she asked for metadata. When they claimed the file system had migrated, she requested the migration records. Fraud hates patient people. The independent engineering reports came back first. They did not use dramatic language. Engineers rarely need it. The steel in several inspected sections did not match approved specifications. Some concrete samples from non-critical areas passed. Others raised concerns that required immediate review before additional loads could be placed. The building was not a pile of rubble waiting to happen the next morning, but it was not the building investors, regulators, or future occupants had been promised. Nora read the report twice. Then she closed her office door and sat very still. She had imagined in her weakest moments that David might lose money one day because of arrogance. She had imagined him embarrassed at a club, ignored by the same people who once praised him, forced to sell the car he loved more than good sense. Those thoughts had been ugly and human and brief. This was different. This was not about David learning pain. This was about workers standing beneath compromised materials while executives argued over paperwork. Nora's report became sharper after that. Not harsher, sharper. She separated personal history from project facts so thoroughly that anyone reading the file would have struggled to find the wound beneath the professionalism. Vendor diversion, unsupported substitutions, material certification discrepancies, potential forged approvals, immediate safety review recommended, payment freeze recommended, contractor cure notice recommended pending board action. David learned enough to panic. He came to Sterling's office without an appointment and tried to get past reception. When that failed, he called Nora 12 times in one afternoon. She did not answer. He sent messages that moved from charming to wounded to angry in less than an hour. He reminded her that they had once been husband and wife. He said she was letting outsiders turn their private pain into business war. He claimed the substitutions were temporary, the payments explainable, the signatures administrative. The whole thing exaggerated by people who did not understand construction pressure. Nora forwarded every message to legal. The formal review meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in Sterling's main conference room. The room overlooked the city David had wanted so badly to impress. Around the table sat Sterling executives, outside counsel, engineers, lender representatives, and David, with 2 attorneys who looked expensive enough to bill in 6-minute increments for the act of breathing. David arrived dressed like confidence. Navy suit, perfect tie, watch bright against his cuff. He nodded to people as if he belonged among them by natural law. Vanessa was not there. That absence said more than her presence would have. Nora sat across from him with her report closed in front of her. The meeting began with neutral language. Scope, findings, contract obligations, safety responsibilities. David's attorney argued that the audit had been tainted by Nora's personal relationship with David and suggested with careful politeness that her conclusions were emotionally motivated. It was the argument Nora had expected. A woman wronged by a man could always be made to look irrational if the room preferred comfort over evidence. Adam did not rescue her from the accusation. He did something better. He let the process answer. The second controls manager confirmed that he had independently reviewed Nora's findings. The legal observer confirmed that all requests and evidence handling had followed procedure. The engineering consultant confirmed material discrepancies. The lender representative asked David's team for an explanation of the forged approvals. David leaned forward, then seeing his opening. He said the approvals were not forged. He claimed Nora had remained informally involved with Miller Construction after their separation, that she had been aware of cost strategies, that she had approved certain substitutions during a confusing transition and was now denying it because their relationship had deteriorated. For the first time that morning, Nora looked directly at him. There are lies that insult facts, and there are lies that insult entire years of a person's life. David's lie did both. He had thrown her into the rain, removed her account access, told staff not to route finance questions to her, and then tried to tell a room full of professionals that she had secretly remained responsible enough to approve his shortcuts. Nora opened her folder. She did not raise her voice. She presented the timeline. On the night of March 18th, David removed her access from the Miller Construction Finance portal at 11:42 p.m. The first disputed approval using her old digital signature was created on March 21st at 6:13 a.m. from an IP address registered to the penthouse. Another was created 2 weeks later from David's executive office. The original signature certificate had expired months earlier, but a stored image of it had been pasted into the forms. The metadata showed the documents had been assembled by a user account assigned to David's assistant. Then Nora presented the email David's own team had produced by accident inside a backup export. In it, David had instructed the assistant to use the old Vance approval mark because lenders trusted Nora's risk controls and would not question routine substitutions if her name appeared in the file. The room went quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when powerful people realize the story has left the control of the person selling it. David's attorney stopped writing. David stared at the screen. A red flush began at his neck and climbed toward his face. For a few seconds, he looked less like a construction executive than the man Nora remembered from the early days, cornered by a bill he had no plan to pay. But this time, Nora was not there to invent a solution that protected him from the cost of himself. The board asked him whether the email was authentic. David did not answer directly. He talked about pressure. He talked about schedule demands. He talked about how everyone in construction understood the difference between paperwork compliance and practical field decisions. The more he spoke, the worse it became. He did not deny the diversion. He did not explain the vendor. He did not produce missing certificates. He only tried to make danger sound normal. Nora let him talk until the room heard enough. Then she delivered the recommendation. Sterling should suspend Miller Construction from active work immediately, secure the site, freeze disputed payments, notify the lender and relevant authorities, perform a full structural review, and pursue contractual remedies for fraud, breach, and safety violations. She also recommended that Sterling arrange direct payment protection for innocent subcontractors and workers wherever legally possible, because David's misconduct should not become unpaid wages for people who had followed orders. That last recommendation mattered. Nora did not want a collapse that crushed everyone beneath David. She wanted the truth to stop at the person responsible. The board approved the recommendations before noon. By sunset, Miller Construction had been removed from active control of Riverside Quarter. Security changed site access. Engineers began expanded inspections. Payment flows were frozen. Notices went out to insurers, lenders, and regulatory contacts. David's company phone started ringing with calls he could not charm his way through. For the first time in years, David discovered what his confidence looked like without Nora underneath it. He tried to reach her that evening in the parking garage. He should not have been able to get that close, and later Adam would make sure building security understood that history sometimes walks in wearing a visitor badge. Nora was nearly at her car when David stepped from beside a concrete pillar, no longer polished, no longer composed. He asked for 5 minutes. Nora did not move closer. She kept her keys in her hand and told him he could speak from where he stood. The old Nora might have softened at the sight of him unraveling. This Nora saw the unraveling and waited for truth. David begged in the language of shared history because it was the only language he had left. He reminded her of the rented office, the leaking roof, the paper cups of champagne. He said he had been stupid, pressured, intoxicated by success. He said Vanessa had meant nothing. He said the money had gotten away from him. He said if the report went forward, he would lose the company, the project, the reputation he had spent his life chasing. Nora listened. She thought of the nights she had worked until her eyes burned. She thought of moving money from her own account into payroll without telling him because his pride would have turned gratitude into anger. She thought of the missing shoe in the suitcase. She thought of future residents, future workers, future strangers who would never know her name and should not have to trust a building made weaker by David's vanity. She told him that if his betrayal had ended with breaking her heart, forgiveness might have been a private matter. But he had forged her name onto documents that hid unsafe decisions. He had used stolen credibility to cover stolen money. He had put other people at risk and then tried to make her responsible for it. There was nothing private about that. David cried then, or came close enough to it. Years earlier, Nora would have reached for him automatically. This time, her hands stayed still. Not because she hated him. Hatred would have meant he still had a room inside her. She simply understood with a clarity that felt almost merciful that compassion did not require surrendering judgment. She walked to her car. David called after her, not angrily at first, then angrily when pleading failed. By the time she drove away, he had become the same man again, furious, not because he had done wrong, but because wrong had consequences he could not assign to someone else. The collapse of Miller Construction did not happen in one dramatic explosion. It happened in documents. The lender declared default under project compliance terms. Sterling filed claims. Insurers opened investigations. Vendors who had extended credit to David demanded payment. The city paused related approvals. News of the safety review spread faster than any official statement, because construction is a world where people pretend gossip is not information, while acting on it immediately. The sports car disappeared first, then the club membership, then the penthouse listing appeared quietly online, photographed so beautifully it looked like no one had ever cried inside it. David tried to raise emergency money, but investors who once enjoyed his confidence now called it a liability. Banks that had tolerated his optimism when the project was rising became very precise when the project stopped. Vanessa left before the worst headlines. She did not make a scene. She simply removed photographs, stopped appearing at events with him, and told mutual acquaintances that David had misrepresented his situation. Maybe that was true. Maybe she had chosen not to look too closely while the gifts kept arriving. Nora did not spend much energy deciding. Vanessa had been a symptom, not the disease. The disease was David's belief that admiration could replace integrity. Several months later, the court filings made the numbers public. Miller Construction faced claims that could reach tens of millions depending on remediation costs, penalties, and damages. David personally faced investigation over diverted funds and forged documents. Some charges would take time. Some settlements would happen quietly. But the name he had wanted on cranes became the name people used in cautionary conversations. Nora did not celebrate. That surprised people who did not understand the difference between justice and pleasure. She was relieved the project had been stopped before greater harm. She was grateful workers were protected where Sterling could protect them. She was satisfied that evidence had spoken. But there was grief, too. Not grief for the penthouse or the status or the marriage as it had become. Grief for the young woman who had sat beside David on paint buckets and believed that love, labor, and patience could teach a hungry man how to be grateful. One evening, Charles found Nora at his kitchen table, reading an article about the investigation, without really seeing it. He poured tea and sat across from her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then he told her that being right about David had not made him happy. Nora looked up, and for the first time, her father apologized for the warnings that had once sounded like judgment. He said he had been afraid for her, but fear had made him speak as if her love were foolish instead of brave. That apology healed something neither of them had named. Nora told him she had mistaken endurance for faith. She had thought loving someone meant staying long enough for the best version of them to arrive. Charles said love could wait with a person through hardship, but it could not become the only thing holding up their character. Nora carried that sentence with her longer than any headline. The letter from David came after the bankruptcy filing. It arrived at Sterling's office because he no longer knew where she lived. The envelope was plain. His handwriting looked smaller than she remembered. Nora let it sit on her desk for 2 days before opening it. When she finally did, she read it alone late in the evening, with the city lights reflected in the office window. David wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that losing everything had stripped away the people who only loved the performance. He admitted in language that sounded painful for him to form that Nora had been the one person who stood beside him, before standing beside him offered anything. He said he had confused her caution with weakness because he needed to believe his recklessness was courage. He said he understood now that the company had survived because of work she never demanded credit for. Then he asked for a chance to see her, not to fix everything he claimed, just to talk, just to apologize in person, just to see whether anything human remained between them. Nora read the letter 3 times. There had been a season when those words would have pulled her backward. She might have mistaken regret for transformation. She might have heard loneliness and called it love. But healing had made her less available to confusion. David was sorry after the cost found him. That did not mean the sorrow was fake. It also did not mean she owed it a door. She wrote back by hand, because some endings deserve care, even when they do not deserve reunion. Nora told him she accepted the apology he was capable of giving. She told him she hoped to use the consequences of his actions to become honest, not simply poorer. She told him she had forgiven him enough not to carry hatred forward, but forgiveness was not consent to return. The marriage had ended the night he decided her worth depended on whether she flattered his new life. The professional consequences had begun the day he used her name to hide choices that endangered others. She wished him accountability. She wished him the courage to live without applause. She did not wish him back into her life. After sending the letter, Nora went home to her small apartment, which no longer felt temporary. There was a real bed now, a green chair by the window, and a shelf where she kept the few things from her old life that still belonged to her without pain. She had bought back the old gray ledger from storage after the divorce proceedings began. David had left it behind because he never understood its value. Inside were the handwritten records of every year she had kept the company breathing. She did not keep it as proof against him. She kept it as proof for herself. Page after page showed a woman who had been tired, underpaid, unseen, and still astonishingly capable. The ledger no longer accused her of staying too long. It reminded her that the skills she had poured into the wrong place had not been wasted. They had been hers all along. Riverside Quarter eventually continued under new contractors, stricter oversight, and a safety review so thorough it became a model inside Sterling Group. Nora helped design a contractor integrity protocol that required independent verification of critical materials, stronger digital signature controls, protected reporting channels for project administrators, and direct escalation routes for workers who saw something wrong before executives wanted to hear it. The reform did not make headlines the way scandal did. Reform rarely does. But years later, when a junior site coordinator on another project questioned a suspicious delivery and was taken seriously within hours instead of ignored for weeks, Nora considered that a better victory than any public humiliation David endured. Her reputation grew because she did not chase reputation. Developers began requesting her involvement on difficult projects. Lenders trusted her reports because she made bad news clear before it became catastrophic. Younger analysts sought her out because she taught them that integrity was not a personality trait you admired in speeches. It was a set of habits: saving the original file, asking the second question, refusing the convenient shortcut, protecting the person with less power in the room. Adam watched all of this without trying to own any part of it. Over time, the clean, professional distance between them softened into friendship. It happened slowly, in ordinary moments rather than dramatic declarations. A cup of coffee left on her desk before a long review, a disagreement over risk thresholds that ended with both of them laughing at how stubborn they were, a Saturday volunteer event where Nora saw Adam listening to a retired carpenter explain why a training program for young workers needed better transportation support, a quiet dinner after a project closed where neither of them mentioned David until Nora did, and Adam let the subject pass through the room without making it heavier. Nora did not fall in love because Adam rescued her. She fell in love because he did not confuse respect with rescue. He never asked her to be grateful for basic decency. He never treated her strength as a wall he needed to climb. He understood that some people come out of betrayal not wanting to be handled gently, but wanting to be met honestly. When Adam finally told Nora he loved her, he did it without spectacle. He said he admired her mind before he knew her heart, and he loved her heart more because it had not turned cruel after being wounded. Nora did not answer quickly. She had learned the cost of giving trust to a promise just because it sounded beautiful. Adam did not rush her. That patience became part of the answer. Their relationship grew in daylight. Charles met Adam over dinner and studied him with the protective suspicion of a father who had already watched one charming man fail his daughter. Adam did not perform. He asked Charles about the lending office where he had worked, listened to the answer, and later remembered the names of two people Charles mentioned only once. Nora noticed. Her father noticed, too, though he pretended not to. The day Adam proposed, there was no crowd, no skyline restaurant, no attempt to turn intimacy into evidence for other people. He brought Nora to the first Riverside Quarter building after it opened safely under new oversight. The lobby was filled with morning light. Workers from the completed project moved through the space with coffee cups and tool bags, touching up small details before tenants arrived. Adam told Nora that some people built monuments to themselves, and some people built systems that allowed strangers to walk safely through the world. He asked whether she would build a life with him, not because she needed a new life, but because the one she had made for herself was the only kind he wanted to join. Nora said yes. Their wedding took place near the coast, in a house open to the ocean wind. It was elegant, but not extravagant in the old way David would have admired. No one there needed the flowers to prove wealth, or the guest list to prove importance. Charles walked Nora down the aisle with tears he did not bother hiding. In the front row sat people from Sterling, old friends from Duke, workers from projects Nora had protected, and a few women who had once come to her quietly after meetings to ask how she learned to speak so calmly when powerful people wanted her to feel small. Nora wore a simple dress with clean lines and no heavy ornament. Around her wrist was not a diamond bracelet, not a symbol bought with stolen money, but her mother's old watch, repaired by Charles as a wedding gift. It had stopped years earlier. Now it kept time again. During the reception, Nora gave a short toast. She did not name David. She did not need to. She spoke about foundations. She said every structure, whether it was a building, a company, or a marriage, eventually revealed what it had been built on. paint could hide cracks for a while. Good lighting could flatter a weak room. Applause could make a dangerous thing seem successful from far away. But wait always found the truth. She said she had once believed love meant carrying someone until they became who they promised to be. Now she believed love meant standing beside someone who carried responsibility with you. She thanked the people who had helped her remember that losing a place where she was not valued had opened the way to a life where she no longer had to beg to be seen. Adam looked at her as if every word mattered. Later that night, when the music had softened and guests drifted toward the terrace, Nora stepped outside alone for a moment. The ocean moved under a darkening sky. The air smelled of salt and flowers. She thought of the rain outside the penthouse, the suitcase, the missing shoe, the woman she had been under that awning, wondering how her life had emptied so quickly. Nora wished she could reach back to that version of herself and tell her that emptiness was not the end. Sometimes it was space. Sometimes life had to clear the room of everything built on disrespect before anything honest could stand. David's name would appear in records for years, attached to lawsuits, settlements, and professional consequences. Some people would still tell the story wrong. They would say his ex-wife ruined him. They would ignore the bad steal, the false approvals, the stolen funds, and the workers who might have paid for his pride. People often prefer betrayal stories that make a woman's pain seem more dangerous than a man's choices. But Nora knew the truth. She had not ruined David Miller. She had stopped protecting him from the structure he built for himself. And in doing so, she finally stepped out from under it. If this story stayed with you, remember Nora's lesson. Do not measure love by how much of yourself you can lose for someone else. Measure it by whether your sacrifice is honored, whether your voice is respected, and whether the person beside you becomes more honest when life gives them power. Because money does not change a person's character. It removes the excuses that once hid it. And sometimes the night someone throws you out is the first night the truth lets you come home to yourself.
Yes. Please send written confirmation.
The estate, the flowers, the dinner, the band, the cake, the yacht honeymoon annual, $8,000 to $6,000. And every dollar had come from Maya. Not her mother, not the groom, not even the bride.
She was the daughter who answered at midnight, the sister who transferred money before asking questions. For years, she believed that if she gave enough, love would finally arrive wearing gratitude's face. Just fix it. Then they'll stop being angry. Then, the night before Chloe's wedding, the room went silent. Some people confuse money with importance, and it is ugly to watch. We do not invite beggars like you. Leave! That was when Maya finally understood. Her money was welcome, but her dignity was optional.
Maya Vance did not cry when the venue manager called to confirm the cancellation. That surprised her. For years, Maya had cried in private over things her family said in public. She had cried in airport bathrooms after sending emergency money she could not emotionally afford to send. She had cried in her car outside pharmacies in the quiet corner of her office after another message from her mother, and once silently beside her sleeping husband because she could not explain why being needed so much could still feel like being unloved. But that night, in a hotel room overlooking a dark stretch of Long Island water, when the manager of the Hamptons estate asked if she was absolutely sure she wanted to withdraw her authorization for the wedding charges, Maya's voice did not shake. She only looked at the numbers on her laptop. The estate, the floral installation, the plated dinner, the string quartet for the ceremony and the band for the reception, the photographer, the custom cake, the transportation, the Mediterranean yacht honeymoon that her sister had called a once-in-a-lifetime beginning. $86,000, and every dollar had come from Maya, not from her mother, who had spent months acting like the wedding was proof of her own elegance, not from the groom, who liked expensive things more when someone else paid for them, not from her sister Chloe, who kept saying she was overwhelmed and promising she would pay Maya back when life settled down. Maya had paid because that was what Maya did. She solved things. She covered gaps. She made panic disappear. She was the daughter who answered at midnight, the sister who transferred money before asking questions, the wife who apologized to her husband for family emergencies that had somehow become part of their marriage. She had built a life in Seattle with discipline, intelligence, and long hours. Yet, whenever her family looked at her, they did not see the woman who had become a senior strategy director at one of the largest technology companies in the country. They saw a wallet that could feel guilty. And the worst part was that Maya had helped them see her that way. For most of her adult life, she believed that if she gave enough, eventually love would arrive wearing gratitude's face. She thought every paid hospital bill, every cleared credit card, every rescued apartment lease, every emergency loan quietly forgiven would count as proof that she was devoted. She thought her mother would finally stop comparing her to Chloe, stop calling her cold, stop acting as if success had made her selfish. Then the night before Chloe's wedding, in a room full of relatives and friends, Lillian Vance looked at the daughter who had paid for nearly everything and said, "We do not invite beggars like you. Leave." The room had gone silent. Not protective silent. Not shocked in a way that moved anyone to defend her. Just frozen, uncomfortable, waiting for the humiliation to pass so the party could continue. Maya had stood there in the pale gold light of the rehearsal dinner, still holding the small clutch Chloe had asked her to carry because it matched the bridesmaids' dresses she was no longer allowed to wear. She remembered the linen napkins folded into seashells. She remembered the smell of lemon butter and white flowers. She remembered Jasper, Chloe's groom, lowering his eyes with the faintest smile, as if he had just watched a problem remove itself from the room. That was when something old inside Maya finally stopped asking to be loved. Not all at once, not dramatically. It was quieter than that. It was like hearing a lock click. Before that lock clicked, Maya's life had looked from the outside almost enviable. She lived in Seattle with her husband Ethan in a clean-lined townhouse where the windows caught the morning rain and the shelves were full of books they actually read. Her workdays were demanding, full of market forecasts, product bets, acquisitions, risk meetings, and presentations to executives who expected her to see around corners. She was known for being calm under pressure, the kind of person who could sit in a room full of conflicting egos and bring everyone back to the facts without making anyone feel foolish. At work, Maya was trusted because she was precise. At home, she was loved by Ethan because she was more than useful. He loved the way she paused before answering hard questions. He loved how she bought fresh basil and then forgot to cook with it. He loved that she remembered the names of doormen, receptionists, nurses, and junior analysts. He loved her tired Friday laugh, the one that came out only when she finally let the week fall off her shoulders. But her family had never learned that version of her. To them, Maya was the serious one, the difficult one, the one who had scholarships, then internships, then a title nobody bothered to understand until a bill came due. Lillian liked saying Maya had done well for herself, but she said it with the faint resentment of someone describing a person who had moved too far away from where she belonged. Chloe, 4 years younger, had always been treated differently. Chloe was delicate, according to Lillian. Chloe needed encouragement. Chloe had anxiety around responsibility. Chloe was artistic, sensitive, easily hurt. When Chloe missed rent, it was because landlords were cruel. When Chloe maxed out a credit card, it was because life in the city was expensive. When Chloe quit a job after 3 weeks, it was because the manager had not appreciated her spirit. Maya learned early that her own exhaustion had no poetry in it. If she was tired, she was dramatic. If she needed space, she was selfish. If she said no, her mother would remind her that family was not a contract, and that one day when life humbled her, she would regret forgetting where she came from. So Maya tried not to say no. The first big payment came when her father Richard had a heart procedure that insurance only partly covered. Maya was 26, newly promoted, still paying off her own graduate school loans. Lillian called crying, and Maya sent the money before the surgeon's office closed. Nobody asked how she managed it. Nobody asked what she delayed in her own life. Later, at Thanksgiving, Lillian praised Chloe for bringing a pumpkin pie she had bought from a bakery and forgot to mention that Maya had prevented a medical bill from going to collections. Maya told herself it did not matter. Then came Lillian's overdue mortgage payment, Chloe's broken lease, Richard's medication gap, Chloe's certification course which she never completed, a credit card balance that Lillian insisted was mostly groceries, though Maya noticed several luxury store charges in the statement. Each time there was urgency. Each time Maya was told this was not the moment to lecture. Each time, once the money cleared, the gratitude evaporated so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. Ethan noticed before Maya allowed herself to. He never hated her family. That was one reason she trusted him. He did not barge into her pain with easy contempt. He simply asked questions that sat beside her until she could no longer avoid them. Did they call when they were not in trouble? Did they ask how she was after she helped? Did they ever make a plan that did not include Maya rescuing the ending? Maya would defend them at first. Her mother had been through a lot. Chloe was still figuring herself out. Her father felt ashamed and did not know how to talk about money. Families were complicated. Love did not always arrive in the form you wanted. Ethan would listen, then squeeze her hand and say that complicated was not the same thing as cruel. Maya heard him. She just was not ready to believe him. Then Chloe met Jasper Bell. Jasper looked at first like the kind of man Lillian had always wished one of her daughters would bring home. He came from a family with summer connections on Long Island. He wore linen in a way that seemed practiced. He knew restaurants by the owner's first name, spoke with polished confidence, and described every choice as if it were the obvious choice sensible people would make. Chloe was dazzled. For the first few months, Maya wanted to be happy for her. Chloe sounded lighter on the phone. She posted photos from rooftop dinners, weekend trips, and charity events where Jasper stood with one hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the camera. Lillian adored him almost immediately. Jasper called her Mrs. Vance, brought flowers, praised her taste, and once told her that Chloe had inherited her elegance. That was enough to make Lillian protective of him before Maya had even met him twice. But Maya saw the small things. Jasper corrected Chloe's stories in front of people. He ordered for her without asking and made it sound romantic. He joked that Chloe was hopeless with details, then took control of her calendar, her email reminders, her vendor calls, even her passwords, because, as he put it, she needed less stress. When Chloe talked about going back to finish her degree, Jasper said there would be time after the wedding, then changed the subject to floral palettes. The first time Maya gently asked Chloe if she felt rushed, Chloe laughed too brightly and said, "Maya always worried." The second time Chloe snapped that not every man was trying to control a woman just because he had opinions. The third time Jasper answered Chloe's phone. He said Chloe was resting, that wedding stress had been hard on her, and that Maya's questions were not helping. His tone was smooth enough to pass as concern if you were determined not to hear the warning underneath. Maya did hear it. She called her mother that night carefully, without accusation. She said she hoped she was wrong. She said Chloe seemed smaller around Jasper, less certain, more apologetic. She said a wedding did not have to be canceled for someone to pause and ask whether the relationship felt safe. Lillian's answer came cold and immediate. She accused Maya of being jealous of Chloe's happiness. Jealous that Chloe had found a man from a respected family. Jealous because Maya's own marriage was practical and quiet, while Chloe was about to have the kind of wedding people remembered. Maya sat at her kitchen island in Seattle, watching rain bead against the dark window, and felt a familiar shame rise in her throat, even though she had done nothing wrong. She tried to explain that concern was not envy. Lillian cut her off. She said Maya had always been judgmental. She said money had made Maya think she was better than everyone. She said if Maya truly loved her sister, she would stop spreading poison and support the wedding properly. Support the wedding properly. That phrase became a hook in Maya's chest, because by then she had already sent the first deposit. It began with the venue. Chloe said the Hamptons estate was perfect but out of reach. Lillian said it would break Chloe's heart to lose it. Jasper said his family had offered connections, not cash, because they believed young couples should learn responsibility. Somehow, in that twisted little circle of logic, responsibility landed in Maya's lap. The estate required an immediate hold. Maya paid it. Then came the caterer, who needed a contract under a financially stable name. The florist, who wanted a deposit before ordering imported white orchids and garden roses. The photographer, the band, the cake designer, the transportation company, the makeup team, the custom signage, the rehearsal dinner add-on, the post-wedding brunch, the travel agent handling the honeymoon. Maya asked for a budget spreadsheet. Chloe sent a mood board. Maya asked what Jasper was contributing. Lillian said it was vulgar to interrogate love like an invoice. Maya asked whether some items could be simplified. Chloe cried and said Maya was making her feel poor on purpose. So Maya paid. Not always happily, not blindly, but with that old private bargain still alive inside her. If she was generous enough, maybe this time no one would call her difficult. Maybe Chloe would remember who stood beside her. Maybe Lillian would look at her in the soft way she looked at Chloe when Chloe was fragile. Ethan did not yell when he saw the total. That almost made it worse. He sat with Maya at their dining table while she showed him the payments, and his silence was not judgment. It was grief. He knew she had not spent the money because she liked luxury weddings. He knew she had spent it because some part of her was still trying to buy entry into her own family. He asked one thing. Was her name on the contracts? Maya said yes for several vendors because they wanted the person paying to sign. Some were authorized on her card. Others had pending final payments scheduled through an event coordinator who dealt mostly with Maya because Chloe got overwhelmed and Jasper disliked details that involved limits. Ethan nodded slowly. He did not tell her what to do. He only said that if she was going to carry the cost, she needed to stop pretending she had no power. Maya did not want power. She wanted peace. The week before the wedding, peace became impossible. Chloe stopped taking Maya's calls unless Jasper was nearby. Lillian sent lists of errands as if Maya were staff. Confirm the shuttle times, handle the brunch balance, bring the garment bags, call the florist. Again, do not forget the envelopes for tips. No one asked when Maya and Ethan were flying in. No one asked whether they needed help with transportation. Maya learned from a cousin that she had been moved from the head table to a side table because Jasper's family had seating traditions. Then one day before the rehearsal dinner, Lillian called. Her voice had the polished brightness she used when she had already decided to be cruel and wanted the cruelty to sound practical. She said there had been a change. Chloe no longer felt comfortable with Maya as maid of honor. The energy around Maya had become too negative. Chloe needed women around her who believed in the marriage. Lillian hoped Maya would not make this about herself. Maya stood in the hallway of the hotel, still holding the dress bag containing the gown Chloe had chosen for her. And for a few seconds, she could not speak. She had flown across the country. She had paid for the flowers sitting in refrigeration somewhere nearby. She had paid for the room where people would toast love the next evening. She had paid for the photographer who would capture Chloe stepping into a life Maya was no longer allowed to question. And now she was being told her presence was the problem. Maya asked if Chloe had said this herself. Lillian said Chloe was too upset to talk. That meant Jasper was nearby. Maya knew it with a kind of certainty that does not need proof. Yet, Ethan found her sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, the dress still zipped in plastic beside her. He asked if she wanted to leave. Maya said no. She said she needed to look Chloe in the eyes once, without Jasper's voice in the room, and say that she loved her. She needed to know she had tried. So she went to the rehearsal dinner. The estate was even more beautiful than the photos. It sat behind hedges and iron gates, its pale stone glowing in the late afternoon sun. The lawn swept toward the water. White chairs had been arranged in clean rows for the ceremony. Staff moved quietly with trays, clipboards, and practiced smiles. Everything looked expensive, controlled, effortless. That was the illusion Maya had purchased. Inside, relatives stood around with champagne, complimenting Lillian on the elegance of the event. Lillian accepted every compliment as if she had personally woven the linens, raised the flowers, and negotiated the weather. Chloe stood near the windows in a cream rehearsal dress, beautiful and tense, smiling with her mouth, but not her eyes. Jasper stayed close enough that Maya could not approach without him seeing. Maya waited. For nearly 20 minutes, she let cousins look away from her. She let an aunt ask whether she was still part of things. She let Jasper's mother glance at her empty, ringless bridesmaid wrist, where the floral ribbon should have been, and then pretend she had noticed nothing. Finally, Chloe stepped away from Jasper to speak with the planner near the hall. Maya followed. She said Chloe's name softly. Chloe turned, and for 1 second her face changed. The polished bridal expression cracked, and Maya saw the sister who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. The sister who once begged Maya to teach her how to make pancakes. The sister who cried after their first dog died, and would not sleep unless Maya stayed beside her on the floor. Then Chloe's eyes moved past Maya's shoulder. Jasper was watching. Chloe's face closed. Maya said she was not there to fight. She said she would step back from the wedding party if Chloe truly wanted that. She only needed Chloe to know that love should not make her afraid of having a private conversation with her own sister. Chloe whispered that Maya was embarrassing her. It was barely audible, but Lillian heard enough. Or perhaps she had been waiting for an opening. She crossed the room with the sharp, smiling anger of a woman determined to turn one daughter's pain into another daughter's performance. Her voice rose before she reached Maya. She said this was exactly what she had warned everyone about. She said Maya could not stand for Chloe to be the center of attention. She said some people confused money with importance, and it was ugly to watch. The room turned. That is the thing about public humiliation. It recruits witnesses before anyone has agreed to be involved. People who had been sipping champagne became an audience. Staff slowed down. Jasper folded his arms. Chloe stared at the floor. Maya tried to keep her voice low. She said she was not trying to ruin anything. She said she was worried. Lillian laughed once, hard and empty. She told Maya not to bring that pitiful face into Chloe's joy. She said Chloe deserved one beautiful weekend without Maya's bitterness dripping over everything. She said Maya had always acted deprived, no matter how much she had. Then came the sentence, "We do not invite beggars like you. Leave." It landed with such force that Maya could not move. Beggar. The word seemed to hang between the flowers she had paid for, and the candles she had paid for, and the polished floor of the estate she had paid for. It passed through the room like smoke, making everyone uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to speak. Maya looked at Chloe. Chloe's eyes were wet, but she did not defend her. Maya looked at Richard, her father, sitting near the fireplace with his hands clasped between his knees. He looked devastated, but he did not rise. Maya looked at Jasper. He gave her the smallest shrug. That was when she understood that everyone in that room had accepted a version of the story where Maya's money was welcome, but Maya's dignity was optional. She left without another word. Outside, the evening had turned cooler. The driveway lights had come on, glowing softly along the gravel path. Maya walked past the catering truck, past the flower van, past the staff who had been instructed to treat the event like a fairy tale. Her breath came unevenly. She wanted to get to the car before she broke. Then she heard her mother's voice. It came from a side hallway near the service entrance, where a door had been left partly open. Maya stopped because she heard her own name. Lillian was speaking to a neighbor from their old community, a woman who had known Maya since high school. Her tone was not angry now. It was relaxed, almost amused. She said Maya had become too full of herself, but at least her guilt was useful. She said Chloe deserved a proper wedding and Maya could afford it. She said repayment was something people mentioned to keep Maya quiet, not something anyone intended to do. The neighbor murmured something Maya could not hear. Lillian answered clearly. She said Maya would never really cut them off. Girls like Maya spent their whole lives trying to prove they were not heartless. All you had to do was make them feel guilty enough. Maya stood there with one hand against the wall. For a moment, the hurt was so clean, it almost felt like clarity. This was not confusion. This was not family stress. This was not a mother overwhelmed by wedding pressure saying something she did not mean. Lillian knew exactly what she was doing. She had named Maya's wound and used it like a key. Maya walked to the parking area. Ethan was already waiting beside the rental car. He had seen enough from across the room to follow without interrupting. When Maya reached him, she did not have to explain everything. She only said her mother had called her a beggar, and then she told him what she had overheard. Ethan's face changed, not with surprise, with a kind of quiet finality. He opened the passenger door for her. He drove them back to the hotel without filling the car with speeches. The roads were dark, bordered by hedges and glimpses of expensive houses set far back from the street. Maya stared out the window and felt as if she were passing through a world built for other people's celebrations. In the hotel room, she finally cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. She sat on the floor beside the bed, still in the dress she had worn to the dinner, and cried with both hands pressed over her mouth because some old part of her still did not want to be inconvenient. Ethan sat beside her. He did not tell her to stop. He did not say he had warned her. He did not insult Chloe or Lillian or turn her pain into his own anger. He waited until her breathing steadied, then said the sentence that would divide Maya's life into before and after. You have the right to love your family. You do not have the obligation to let them destroy you. Maya leaned back against the bed. The words did not feel like permission at first. They felt like grief. Because if they were true, then love was not the thing she had been practicing. What she had been practicing was surrender. She had dressed it up as loyalty because loyalty sounded noble, and surrender sounded too painful to admit. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she reached for her laptop. She opened the folder where she had saved every contract because strategy directors do not survive on optimism. She had the estate agreement, the catering addendum, the florist's invoice, the entertainment deposits, the photographer's balance, the honeymoon itinerary, the planner's payment schedule. She had emails showing that she was the payer of record for most of the weekend's luxury. She had credit card authorizations. She had pending transfers not yet settled. She had cancellation clauses she had skimmed months earlier and now read like a woman waking from a spell. Ethan made coffee she did not drink. Maya began calling. The first call was to the venue. She kept her voice professional. She explained that she was withdrawing her financial authorization and canceling the event under the payer terms available to her. The manager sounded startled, then careful. There would be penalties. Some deposits would not return. Certain items had already been prepared. Maya said she understood. She asked for written confirmation. The second call was to the caterer. The kitchen had not yet begun final execution. The balance could be stopped. The premium bar package was canceled. The late-night dessert station disappeared in 3 polite emails and 1 confirmation number. The florist was furious until Maya forwarded the contract showing whose card was attached. The imported orchids would not be delivered. The roses would be redirected where possible. The decorator would not install the arch. The band asked if there had been a death in the family. Maya almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because, in one sense, there had been. A version of her had died in that rehearsal room. The version who believed love would eventually reward self-erasure had not survived the word beggar. She canceled the photographer's remaining balance. She canceled the cars. She canceled the custom cake. She canceled the post-wedding brunch. She canceled the honeymoon booking before the final window closed and accepted the non-refundable portion as the price of education. By 2:17 in the morning, the total value of withdrawn payments, refunds, stopped balances, and canceled services stood at $86,000. Maya stared at the number until it stopped looking like money and started looking like a map of all the places she had abandoned herself. She expected guilt to flood in. It did not. There was sadness. There was shock. There was a deep ache for Chloe, because Maya knew her sister would be humiliated and would blame the easiest person before she blamed the person who had helped build the trap. But under the sadness, something steadier was forming. Not revenge. Relief. For the first time in years, Maya had not explained, pleaded, softened, or paid her way out of someone's anger. She had simply removed her own money from people who had made clear they did not want her, only what they could extract from her. Before sleeping, she turned off her phone. The next morning, Chloe's dream wedding collapsed in pieces. The estate did not open for them as planned. The full staff was not there. The floral truck never arrived. The caterer's polished vans did not pull through the gates. The band canceled. The photographer sent a brief notice that coverage would not proceed without payment confirmation. The cake designer, who had been building a 5-tier confection with sugar flowers that matched Chloe's bouquet, released the order. At first, Lillian thought it was a misunderstanding. She called the planner and demanded explanations. She called the venue and invoked Jasper's family name. She called Maya again and again, each message sharper than the last. When Maya did not answer, Lillian sent texts that moved quickly from confusion to command to insult. Chloe called next. Her first voicemail was panicked. Her second was furious. By the fourth, she was sobbing that Maya had ruined the only beautiful day she had ever had. Maya listened to none of them. She and Ethan had flown back to Seattle on the first morning flight. Somewhere over the country, while Chloe's guests were arriving to chaos, Maya sat by the airplane window with her phone off and watched clouds pass beneath her like a white, silent ocean. Her hands trembled a little. Ethan noticed and placed his hand over hers. He did not say it would be easy. He only stayed. The wedding did not fully disappear. Weddings, like family dysfunction, often find a way to continue badly. Jasper's aunt offered the lawn of a nearby rental house. Folding chairs were borrowed from a local community hall. Someone bought flowers from a supermarket and tried to arrange them in glass pitchers. Instead of the plated dinner, guests ate pizza from cardboard boxes and cold salad from plastic containers. A cousin streamed music through a portable speaker that kept losing connection. The vows happened late under a sky that had gone gray, while relatives whispered behind careful smiles, and Jasper's family pretended this was charmingly informal instead of humiliating. Chloe posted only one photograph. In it, she looked beautiful and exhausted, holding a bouquet wrapped in a paper towel because no one had found ribbon. Maya saw the photo 2 days later and felt pain move through her, but it did not turn into regret. Pain was not proof she had done the wrong thing. It was proof she still loved people who had hurt her. For 3 days, messages arrived from every direction. Aunts accused her of cruelty. Cousins said she could have handled it privately. One uncle, who had once borrowed money from Maya and never repaid it, wrote that family should never keep score. Jasper sent one brief text calling her unstable and warning her not to contact Chloe again. Lillian left a voicemail so furious that Ethan deleted it after Maya heard only the first 10 seconds. Richard, her father, sent no message at all. That silence hurt in a different way. Maya returned to work. On Monday morning, she sat in a conference room overlooking Lake Union and led a discussion on a proposed acquisition, as if her family had not spent the weekend setting fire to her phone. She asked sharp questions. She caught a flawed assumption in a revenue model. She recommended delaying the deal until the regulatory risk was clearer. Her colleagues saw the Maya they always saw, composed, prepared, hard to rattle. Only Ethan saw her that evening when she stood in their kitchen holding a mug of tea she had forgotten to drink. She asked him whether she had become cruel. Ethan said cruelty would have been canceling everything to hurt them while still pretending she wanted peace. What Maya had done was stop funding an event from which she had been publicly cast out. There was a difference. The difference mattered. Still, consequences do not feel clean when they involve people you love. 4 days after the wedding, Lillian came to Seattle. She did not ask to visit. She appeared at Maya's front door in a camel coat, carrying a handbag like armor, and wearing the expression of a woman who had rehearsed outrage for an entire flight. Maya saw her through the video doorbell and almost did not open. Then she remembered that boundaries were not walls you built once. They were doors you learned how to control. She opened the door but did not step aside. Lillian began before Maya spoke. She called Maya ungrateful. She called her selfish. She said Maya had humiliated the family in front of Jasper's relatives. She said Chloe had barely stopped crying. She said a good daughter would have swallowed her pride for one weekend. She said Maya had always punished people when they did not worship her money. Maya listened until her mother's words began circling back on themselves. Then Ethan walked into the entryway. He did not raise his voice. That made Lillian angrier at first. Some people depend on escalation because calm gives them nothing to grab. Ethan said Lillian was standing in the home of the woman who had paid her medical bills, protected her house, cleared her overdue balances, covered Chloe's rent, paid Chloe's credit cards, and financed the wedding she had been removed from. He said Maya was not a beggar. She was a senior strategy executive earning $250,000 a year because she had worked relentlessly for a life her family only respected when invoices needed attention. Lillian's face shifted. It was not that she had never known Maya made good money. She had known enough to ask for it. What startled her was hearing the truth arranged in one straight line without apology. People like Lillian survived by separating events. This bill was different. That loan was necessary. That insult was stress. That demand was family. Ethan placed them together, and the pattern became visible even to the person who had benefited from it. Maya added one thing. She said Lillian had called her a beggar in the room that Maya paid for. For the first time, Lillian had no immediate answer. Her eyes moved around the entryway, taking in the house, as if seeing Maya's life not as evidence of selfish distance, but as the result of years of discipline. The clean floors, the framed print from Maya and Ethan's first trip to Vancouver, the stack of work documents on the console table, the umbrella drying beside the door because Seattle had welcomed Maya home with rain. Lillian's anger did not vanish. It faltered. That was not enough. Maya said she would not continue the conversation in the doorway. If Lillian wanted to talk, truly talk, there would be a family meeting with Ethan present, Richard present, Chloe present if she chose, and no yelling. If anyone insulted anyone, the meeting would end. Lillian scoffed and said Maya was treating family like a boardroom. Maya said a boardroom had rules, and rules were sometimes kinder than chaos. The first meeting happened 2 weeks later over video because Chloe refused to come to Seattle. and Richard said travel was hard on him. Maya did not begin with accusations. She began with documents, not because she wanted to shame them with spreadsheets, because for years vagueness had protected everyone but her. She listed the major payments she had made over the previous 7 years: medical balances, mortgage rescue, rent assistance, credit cards, wedding payments, emergency travel, personal loans that were never treated as loans once the emergency passed. She did not include every grocery run, every birthday gift, every small kindness. She was not trying to turn love into arithmetic. She was trying to show that the story they had told about her selfishness could not survive contact with reality. Chloe cried almost immediately. Lillian accused Maya of humiliating them. Richard lowered his head. Maya waited. Waiting was a skill she had learned in rooms where powerful people mistook silence for weakness. She let the discomfort breathe until Lillian stopped speaking. Then Maya explained the new rules. There would be no more unconditional financial rescues. Emergencies would be discussed, not dumped on her. Debts would belong first to the person who created them. If Maya chose to help in the future, the terms would be written down. The wedding money would be repaid in small monthly amounts, not because Maya needed it to survive, but because the family needed to learn that her labor had value, even when she could afford to lose the money. Chloe said that was cold. Maya said cold would have been disappearing without a word. This was an invitation to become honest. The final condition was counseling. Family therapy first, then individual therapy for anyone willing to participate. No one had to pretend the therapist was magic. No one had to confess perfectly. But if they wanted access to Maya's life, they had to learn a way of speaking that did not depend on guilt, fear, or public shame. Lillian rejected it at once. She said therapy was for people who wanted strangers to blame their mothers. Maya said therapy was for people who wanted a conversation where no one could win by being the loudest. The meeting ended badly. Not explosively, because Maya ended it before it could explode. Lillian called her controlling. Chloe said she needed time, and Richard finally whispered that maybe they all did. Maya closed the laptop with her hands steady, and then cried in Ethan's arms for 20 minutes, because strength did not make the loss painless. For months, little changed on the surface. Lillian sent icy messages about betrayal. Chloe alternated between begging and blaming. Jasper made sure Chloe understood that Maya's cruelty had embarrassed them in front of his family, and he used that embarrassment as proof that Chloe should stop listening to her sister. Richard mailed Maya a handwritten note with 3 sentences. He was sorry, he had been ashamed, and shame had made him useless when she needed him. Maya read it several times before she answered. The repayment plan began late and small. The first transfer from Chloe was $30. Years earlier, Maya might have smiled sadly and told her not to worry about it. This time she wrote back, "Received, thank you." That was all. No emotional discount. No rescue hidden inside reassurance. Chloe hated that at first. Then something strange happened. Without Maya paying the next bill, Chloe had to open the bill. Without Maya calling the credit card company, Chloe had to sit through the automated menu herself. Without Maya smoothing over shortfalls, Chloe had to ask why Jasper was spending money from their shared account on private dinners he described as networking. Control does not always announce itself through shouting. Sometimes it arrives as convenience. Jasper had made everything convenient for Chloe until the convenience became a cage. He handled passwords, then questioned why she needed access. He managed schedules, then accused her of being irresponsible when she asked to change them. He said Maya was toxic, then used Chloe's isolation to become the only voice in the room. He complained about Maya's money, while also resenting the loss of it. The marriage frayed quickly once the wedding spectacle was gone. There was no fairy tale to hide inside. There was rent, debt, bruised pride, and a husband who liked being admired more than being accountable. Chloe began noticing that apologies from Jasper always turned into explanations of what she had done wrong. She noticed that he could charm strangers while making her feel foolish in private. She noticed that every dream she had postponed for after the wedding remained postponed, because now there was another reason, another bill, another mood of his to manage. The first time Chloe attended therapy alone, she did not tell Maya. The second time, she texted only one sentence afterward. "I think I have been scared for longer than I admitted." Maya sat with a phone in her hand for a long time before replying. She wanted to rush in. She wanted to ask questions, offer flights, pay for lawyers, solve the whole painful knot. The old reflex came alive, like a hand reaching for a hot pan. Instead, she wrote, "I believe you. I am here. I will help you make a safe plan, but I will not take over your life." That became the new shape of love between them. Not absence, not rescue, presence with boundaries. Chloe's divorce took nearly a year. It was messy in the ordinary ways controlling marriages often are messy. Jasper denied, minimized, blamed, Maya blamed, Lillian blamed stress, blamed the ruined wedding, blamed Chloe's supposed instability. But documents have a sturdiness that emotion does not. Bank records showed spending, messages showed pressure. Friends slowly admitted they had seen Chloe shrinking and had not known how to intervene. Maya helped Chloe find an attorney, but Chloe had to attend the meetings. Maya helped with one security deposit when Chloe moved, but it was written as a loan, with a repayment plan Chloe herself proposed. Maya helped Chloe compare college programs, but Chloe filled out the forms. At first, Chloe interpreted every boundary as rejection. Then slowly, she began to experience them as proof that Maya believed she could survive. That distinction changed her. She returned to school, part-time, then full-time. She worked at a small design studio during the day and took evening classes with people younger than her, which embarrassed her until she realized everyone in that room had a story. She learned how to budget, badly, then better. She made late payments, then fewer late payments. She cried over spreadsheets. She celebrated the first month she paid rent without asking anyone for help. She sent Maya repayment transfers so small they would have seemed ridiculous to the old family system, and each one made her stand a little straighter. Lillian's change was slower. For a long time she treated therapy like a courtroom, where she had been falsely accused. She arrived armed with examples of Maya's distance, Chloe's sensitivity, Richard's weakness, and her own sacrifices as a mother. She wanted the therapist to confirm that families needed loyalty, and she seemed genuinely offended when the therapist asked whether loyalty without respect had another name. Lillian did not transform during one tearful session. She resisted. She argued. She missed appointments. She said the therapist misunderstood family culture. She complained that Maya had become Americanized by corporate life, as if respecting boundaries were a luxury imported from a business seminar. Then, during one session, almost a year after the wedding, Richard spoke with unusual steadiness. He said he had watched Lillian praise Chloe for needing help and punish Maya for providing it. He said he had been grateful for Maya's money and ashamed of needing it, and instead of defending his daughter, he had hidden inside silence. He said the night Lillian called Maya a beggar, he had felt something in the family break, and he had known they had broken it, not Maya. Lillian left that session furious. But the next week, she came back. That was the first real sign. Not an apology, not understanding. Return. Change often begins as the simple fact that someone stops running from the room where the truth is being spoken. Over time, Lillian began to examine the story she had used to excuse herself. She had grown up in a family where love was measured through sacrifice, and daughters were praised for carrying pain quietly. She had learned to admire need because need gave her purpose. Chloe's fragility made Lillian feel important. Maya's competence made her feel unnecessary, then resentful. Instead of being proud of Maya's strength, Lillian had punished her for not requiring the kind of mothering Lillian knew how to give. None of that erased the harm. Maya needed it not to erase the harm. An explanation could open a door, but it could not walk through it. Lillian had to do that through behavior. The first apology that mattered did not happen in a dramatic family gathering. It came in a voice message Maya almost deleted because old fear made her tired before she heard a word. Lillian's voice was quieter than usual. She said she had been thinking about the rehearsal dinner. She said she had used the word beggar because she wanted to make Maya small in front of people. She said she understood now that this was not a mistake of tone. It was cruelty. Maya listened to the message twice. Then she saved it. She did not call back immediately. She did not rush to comfort her mother for feeling guilty. That, too, was new. The next apology came in person. Lillian flew to Seattle for a therapy session and asked to meet Maya afterward at a small cafe near the water. Rain moved across the windows in soft lines. Lillian held her coffee with both hands and for once did not begin by defending herself. She said she had treated Maya as if being capable meant being unbreakable. She said she had accepted Maya's help and then resented the reminder that she needed it. She said she had turned motherhood into leverage. She said she was sorry, not only for the wedding, but for the years before it. Maya cried in that cafe, but she did not collapse into forgiveness, like a person grateful for crumbs. She said she wanted a relationship, not a return to the old one. She said she loved her mother and would not be available for manipulation anymore. She said apology was welcome, but trust would be rebuilt through patterns. Lillian nodded. For once, she did not argue. 5 years after the wedding, Maya hosted Thanksgiving in Seattle. The house was warmer than it had been in the old days, not because the furniture had changed much, but because Maya no longer walked through it with her phone in her hand, waiting for the next family emergency. The dining table had been extended, with a leaf Ethan always struggled to lock into place. Rain tapped at the windows. The kitchen smelled of roasted turkey, garlic, rosemary, and the sweet potatoes Chloe insisted on making herself because she had finally learned to cook them without burning the marshmallows. Chloe arrived early. She was different in ways that would not have shown in a photograph. Her shoulders were lower. Her laugh came from deeper in her body. She had finished her degree the previous spring and was working as a project coordinator for a design firm, a job that required calendars, budgets, client calls, and all the practical details she once believed she could not handle. She had paid back the last of the wedding debt 6 months earlier. Maya had cried when the final transfer came through, not because of the money, but because each payment had been a brick in Chloe's new self-respect. Chloe brought flowers from a local market, not imported orchids, not a display meant to impress strangers. Just autumn flowers wrapped in brown paper, chosen because the colors looked like the scarf Maya wore in winter. She handed them to Maya and said she saw them and thought of her. Maya understood the size of that small sentence. Lillian and Richard arrived after noon. Richard hugged Maya longer than usual. He had become gentler since therapy, less hidden behind shame. He helped Ethan with chairs and asked questions about Ethan's work, without turning the conversation back to bills. Lillian carried a pie she had baked herself, imperfect at the edges, and when Maya complimented it, Lillian smiled like someone learning to receive kindness without converting it into debt. There were awkward moments. Real healing includes them. Lillian began once to comment on the cost of something in Maya's kitchen, then stopped herself and asked instead whether Maya liked it. Chloe almost apologized for taking up space at the stove, then caught Maya's eye and laughed. Richard grew quiet when the conversation brushed against the wedding, not because everyone was pretending it had not happened, but because the memory still carried weight. At dinner, no one made a speech. That was what made it feel honest. They passed plates. They argued mildly about whether the stuffing needed more sage. Ethan told a story about a work presentation that went wrong when the projector failed. Chloe described a client who changed an entire design brief because of one tile sample. Lillian asked Maya about a strategy project and listened to the answer without glazing over, without waiting for the part where money might enter the conversation. Under the table, Ethan took Maya's hand. Maya looked around the room. Her mother was older now, softer in the face, still imperfect, still capable of old habits if she stopped paying attention. Her sister was not fragile in the way Lillian had once insisted. She was scarred, yes, and still learning, but she was also funny, practical, stubborn, and proud of herself in a way Maya had never seen before. Her father was present, not loud, not transformed into a different man, but present enough to meet his daughter's eyes. And Maya herself was not waiting to be chosen. That was the quiet miracle. The family had not become perfect. They had become accountable. There were still boundaries. Maya did not pay bills simply because someone panicked. She did not answer messages that arrived like commands. She did not let apologies erase patterns or let love be used as a reason to reopen old wounds. Sometimes Lillian forgot and pushed. Sometimes Chloe spiraled and wanted rescue. Sometimes Maya felt the old guilt rise so sharply she had to put her phone down and breathe. But guilt no longer made the decisions. Love did. Real love, the kind with a spine. After dinner, Chloe helped Maya wash dishes while Lillian wrapped leftovers. The kitchen window had fogged at the edges. Ethan and Richard were in the living room pretending not to nap through a football game. For a while, the sisters worked in comfortable quiet. Then Chloe said she had thought about that wedding photo, the one with the paper towel around the bouquet. Maya turned off the water. Chloe said she used to hate Maya for that picture. She thought it proved Maya had ruined her life. Now she kept a copy in a folder on her computer, not because she liked looking at it, but because it reminded her of the day the fantasy cracked wide enough for truth to enter. She said if the wedding had gone beautifully, she might have stayed dazzled longer. She might have mistaken performance for love for years. She might have let Jasper decide the shape of her whole life. Maya felt tears gather, but she smiled. Chloe did not say thank you for canceling the wedding. That would have been too simple and not entirely true. She said, "I am sorry I let you stand alone in that room." That was the sentence Maya had needed for 5 years. Not because it changed the past. Nothing changes the past. But it named the wound correctly. It admitted that the deepest hurt had not only been Lillian's insult, it had been the silence around it. The family had watched Maya be reduced to a source of money and a target of shame, and for years Maya had mistaken their silence for proof that she deserved it. Now Chloe was saying she had deserved defense. Maya dried her hands and hugged her sister. It was not the kind of hug that fixes everything. It was better than that. It was the kind that accepts that some things were broken and still chooses to hold what has been repaired. Later that night, after everyone left and the house returned to its ordinary quiet, Maya stood by the window with a cup of tea. Seattle glittered in the distance, wet streets reflecting gold and red and white. Ethan came up behind her and rested his chin lightly near her temple. He asked what she was thinking. Maya said she was thinking about how long she had believed kindness meant unlimited access. That belief had nearly cost her herself, because kindness without boundaries does not stay kindness for long. It becomes an invitation for careless people to call your sacrifice normal. It becomes a room where everyone knows you will clean up the mess, so no one learns to stop making it. It becomes a language where love is measured by how much disrespect you can swallow without changing your expression. Maya had swallowed too much. The night she canceled the wedding payments, some people called her cruel. Some still did in their private corners of the family. They preferred the old version of her, the one who could be insulted and invoiced in the same breath. But Maya no longer needed to convince everyone that her boundary was fair. She had learned that people who benefit from your exhaustion often experience your rest as betrayal. That did not make rest wrong. It made it necessary. What Maya did was not simply cancel a wedding. She canceled a family contract she had never signed, but had obeyed for years. The agreement that she would provide without complaint, forgive without repair, appear without being honored, and call it love, because everyone else did. In its place, she wrote a better one. Help could exist, but not without respect. Apology could matter, but not without change. Family could be loved deeply, but not at the cost of one person's dignity. And a daughter could be strong, without being used as the load-bearing wall for everyone else's choices. Maya still believed in generosity. That mattered most. She did not become hard. She did not become bitter. She still sent thoughtful gifts, still showed up for real emergencies, still remembered birthdays, still loved Chloe, still visited her parents. The difference was that generosity now came from freedom instead of fear. When she gave, it was because her heart said yes, not because guilt had dragged her to the door. And when she said no, she no longer explained until her voice disappeared. Sometimes the most loving word in a family is not yes. Sometimes it is enough. Enough pretending exploitation is closeness. Enough treating the responsible child as if responsibility makes them less human. Enough confusing sacrifice with worth. Enough asking one person to carry the consequences of everyone else's refusal to grow. Maya had spent years trying to earn a place in a family that had always been willing to use her place at the table as leverage. The strange, beautiful truth was that once she stopped paying for that seat, she finally learned she did not have to earn it. She already belonged to herself. And from that place, she could decide who was allowed close enough to call it family. So if you are listening to Maya's story and thinking of a bill you paid, a call you answered, a cruel sentence you forgave too quickly because the person who said it shared your blood, remember this. Love does not require you to become endlessly available to people who refuse to become accountable. You can care. You can help. You can hope they heal. But you are allowed to protect the life you worked so hard to build. Maya did not lose her family when she set boundaries. She lost the version of her family that could only function while she disappeared. And in time, what remained had a chance to become something more honest. If you were Maya standing in that rehearsal dinner after being called a beggar at the wedding you paid for, would you have canceled everything too? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you think about boundaries, family, and the cost of being taken for granted like this video, subscribe and send it to someone who needs to hear that kindness is still beautiful, but it should never come at the price of self-respect.